My name is Mary Cole, and at 61, you'd think I'd be used to the way life shifts beneath your feet. Whitaker Street still glittered with the same gold holiday lights stretched from lamppost to lamppost, trembling gently as if Savannah were trying a little too hard to look festive. I drove slowly beneath them, letting the memories come whether I wanted them or not, back when Emily and I would count the brightest houses, arguing over which one looked most magical. She had been 7 then, small enough to believe holiday lights were little signals that someone cared for her. Now she was the one hosting Christmas. Her first year, as she kept announcing like a promotion. I told myself I was proud of her, proud she wanted to create her own traditions. But the truth pressed against my ribs all the way to her driveway. When I stepped inside, laughter spilled from the dining room in bright waves before anyone even noticed the door open. The table sparkled with crystal and polished silver, every place setting precisely matched. Emily turned from the oven, her smile quick and oddly rehearsed. "Mom! Well, Mary, you made it." Her hug barely brushed my shoulders, as if my coat might wrinkle her dress. Mark lifted a hand in polite greeting. The kids didn't look up from their glowing screens. For a moment, I just stood there, holding the pie I'd baked, suddenly unsure what to do with something that once meant comfort. "Dessert table's over there," she said, already turning back to her guests. I placed the pie beside untouched pastries and brushed flour dust from my palms onto my coat. The room smelled like rosemary, an expensive polish, not cinnamon and butter the way our holidays once did. Every sound felt too sharp, the clink of silver, the hollow pop of a cork, laughter with an edge to it, the kind meant to impress rather than welcome. When it was time to sit, my place was at the far end near the window, the seat that used to be hers when she was little. Conversation floated effortlessly among the others, but stopped short before reaching me. Emily poured more wine, joked about work, corrected someone's anecdote as if she'd been waiting for the cue. I smiled when the moment demanded it, nodding like an extra in a play I once directed but no longer starred in. The gifts beneath the tree shimmered. My small red box sat among them, wrapped carefully. Inside was the silver bracelet I'd chosen for her, engraved for Emily with love. I'd imagined her face when she opened it. Now, watching her laugh with everyone but me, I felt the sting of knowing that moment would never come. The warmth of the house didn't belong to me anymore. It belonged to her finely curated version of family. I folded my napkin and lifted my glass, pretending to sip, when Emily glanced my way and offered a distant smile, the kind that never reached the eyes. Something inside me dimmed just a little more. Dinner unfolded with mechanical precision, exactly the way Emily liked her world to run. Every dish arrived in perfect sync, every glass refilled before it emptied. Everything so controlled, so polished, there was no room left for anyone else's imperfection, least of all mine. "Mary, would you pass the rolls?" she said without looking at me. The name hit my ears strangely. She had called me Mom even during arguments. I handed the basket down the table silently. "You'd love these. Mom used to bake them every Christmas," Mark added gently, trying to ease something he didn't fully understand. Emily laughed lightly. "Oh, these are different. Less butter, less sugar, more discipline." Soft chuckles followed. My smile held, though it pulled awkwardly at my face. One of her friends leaned forward, pearls grazing her collarbone. "Emily said you used to bake everything from scratch. That's incredible." "I still do," I said quietly. "Some things don't need updating." Emily lifted her wine glass. "Mary's just sentimental. She still keeps that old cookbook from the 80 seconds. I tried a recipe once everything had mayonnaise. More laughter. This time quicker, almost automatic. I looked toward the Christmas tree. White lights, silver ribbons, no mismatched ornaments Emily once made with her tiny hands. No felt angel she glued together in kindergarten. "I brought a few of the old decorations," I murmured. "They're still in good shape." Emily's voice tightened. "Mom, sorry. Mary, it's fine. I wanted something more modern this year. Trends change." I nodded and let her words fall where they wanted. Conversation drifted back to travel, work, wine. When the plates were cleared, I noticed she hadn't touched the rolls. I nearly asked why, but bit the question back. She was crafting her own world now, one with no space for crumbs from mine. After dinner, the house shifted into that soft post-meal buzz. Clinking plates, light laughter, the shuffle of people who felt comfortable being seen. Emily's friends clustered near the fireplace, wine glasses in hand, while the children vanished upstairs with the ease of people who never questioned whether they belonged. I stayed behind, gathering napkins that didn't really need gathering. "Mom," she began, then caught herself. "Mary, you don't have to do that. We've got people for cleanup." "I don't mind," I said, stacking plates with practiced calm. "Gives me something to do," she smiled, distracted, her gaze already sliding back to the conversation she cared more about. I washed my hands and drifted toward the Christmas tree, where the gifts sat in perfect, curated rows. My little red box stood out small, wrong color, wrong shape. I picked it up and turned toward her. "I brought something for you," I said. "Just a little gift." Emily blinked, surprised. "Oh, you didn't have to?" "I wanted to." She accepted the box delicately, careful not to smudge her nails. She tugged at the ribbon as though unwrapping a formality. The paper fell away, and the bracelet inside caught the light, soft silver, quiet, engraved with "For Emily with love." She smiled politely, too thin around the edges. "Oh, Mom, you shouldn't have spent money on this." "It wasn't much," I said. "It reminded me of when you were small. You used to draw hearts on everything. That was ages ago." Her laugh was airy, almost dismissive. She placed the bracelet back in the box without touching the engraving. "It's lovely, truly, but you know I barely wear jewelry anymore." Mark shifted uneasily beside her. "It's beautiful, Emily. Maybe try it on?" She waved him off. "Later." I nodded, though something inside me folded in on itself like a paper bird collapsing. "It's all right. I just wanted you to have it." "You're always too generous," she said breezily. "You work so hard even when you don't need to." "I guess that's how I raised myself," I murmured. She smirked slightly. "Old habits die hard." Conversations swelled again around us, none of it directed my way. I went back to clearing glasses. No one stopped me. Maybe they thought I enjoyed playing the help. When I returned for my own dessert plate, I saw my slice of pie untouched. The crust had stiffened at the edges, already cold. Still, I carried it to the sink. Warm water hissed over porcelain as the voices behind me grew brighter, freer, further away. For a long moment, I let my hands stay beneath the running stream. The silver flash of the bracelet flickered in my mind, and I knew, with a clarity that hurt more than anger, that somewhere along the way I had turned from a mother into a visitor, someone tolerated but not needed inside the very family I had stitched together with every sacrifice I'd ever made. By the time dessert was officially served, the room buzzed with wine-warm confidence. Emily flourished under the attention. She stood near the table, glass raised, spinning stories about her job, her clients, the demands of her hectic life. Every sentence was polished, every detail chosen to earn admiration. Mark attempted to pull me into the conversation. "Mary used to teach history, right?" he asked kindly. Emily laughed before I could open my mouth. "Oh, yes, Mom was the beloved Civil War storyteller. She always had some dramatic lesson ready for dinner." The guests chuckled politely. I smiled, offering, "Some stories don't grow old, only the listeners do." Emily tilted her head with a practiced smirk. "Still a philosopher, I see." Then something in her expression shifted, small, precise, sharpened. "So, Mom," she said, her voice dipped in honey and something colder, "what exactly do you do with your time now that you're retired? Must be pretty quiet in that little house." I breathed slowly. "Quiet isn't a bad thing. Silence can be earned." She raised her brows. "Peaceful, right. Some people call that lonely. This time the laughter was real. It rippled across the table. Easy, natural for everyone but me. I kept my smile steady. "Loneliness doesn't frighten me, Emily. Pretending does." She stared at me with a look I knew too well, the look she used when she wanted to win, even if no one else understood the game. My God, Mom, you make everything dramatic. Maybe if you weren't so impossible to please, people wouldn't keep their distance. That's not what this is, I said softly. Oh? She leaned forward. Because sometimes it feels like you enjoy being the victim. You've practically made a career out of it. The table fell silent. Even the children paused on the stairs. I met her eyes. You'll understand someday when silence feels like company. She let out one sharp laugh. Then maybe you shouldn't exist at all. The words slammed into the room like a dropped plate. No one moved. No one breathed. I folded my napkin, set it neatly beside my untouched pie, and said quietly, "Then consider your wish granted." I stood. The room contracted around me, air thinning as though the walls themselves recoiled. I walked past the table, past the shining tree, past the curated life she'd assembled to impress strangers. Behind me, Emily's laughter faltered into stunned silence. The night air outside was colder than I expected. I didn't take my coat. I didn't look back. I stepped into the quiet Savannah street lined with bending oaks, their branches hanging low like old witnesses. The lights from her house faded behind me. I kept walking. The cold wrapped around me like a thin, honest truth as I walked down the steps. I didn't bother with my coat. I didn't need it. I needed the air, the kind that didn't demand anything, didn't judge, didn't ask me to smile on cue. The quiet street stretched ahead, lined with old live oaks, bent low as if they were listening, as if they had seen scenes like mine play out 1,000 times before. By the time I reached my car, the porch light behind me was only a dim blur. I turned the key, and the engine's low hum felt steadier than anything inside that house had been. I pulled away slowly. The road wound through familiar corners, places I'd driven through hundreds of times back when Emily needed rides to school, to dance practice, to sleepovers, to her father's lawyer during the divorce. Every turn still carried the echo of her voice, her laughter, her teenage fury, her endless need to be right. Tonight, there was nothing but the soft thrum of tires and my own breath. At a red light near Forsyth Park, I stopped. The fountain still stood in its usual place, glowing green beneath the lamps. I saw a ghost of our past right there, Emily, wobbling on her pink bicycle, looking back at me with absolute certainty. I won't fall, Mom. I promise. And I'd believed her. I always did. The light turned green. I drove toward the river. When I parked by the railing, the world felt wider than it had in years. The river rolled dark and steady, patient like the version of myself I used to be before life carved away at my softness. I stepped out, leaning against the hood of the car, letting the wind whip around me. It smelled like salt and pine, like something ancient and forgiving. My hands trembled, but not from the cold. They shook because something inside me was breaking free, splinter by splinter. All my life, I'd said yes. Yes to her needs. Yes to her moods. Yes to shrinking myself so she could stretch out her wings. I used to call it love. Maybe it had been fear. A fear that if I disappointed her, I'd lose her. And somehow, in trying to keep her close, I'd lost myself instead. I whispered into the night, barely loud enough for the water to hear. This time, I will protect myself. The words felt foreign on my tongue, but they were mine maybe for the first time in decades. Behind me, the city clung to its illusion of Christmas. Music, lights, a celebration I was no longer part of. But under the moss-draped trees and the heavy Savannah sky, I began to understand that loving my daughter didn't mean allowing her to chip away at me until nothing remained. I got back into the car, turned toward home, and refused to glance at the rearview mirror. When I reached the house, everything was still. No warm glow spilling from windows, no scent of pine or cookies, only the faint ticking of the hallway clock greeting me like an old friend. I set my keys on the table and realized I hadn't even taken off my shoes. I stood in the kitchen for a long moment, staring at the pile of unopened mail beside the fruit bowl bills, bank letters, donation envelopes, the usual clutter of quiet lives. My hands moved on their own, opening the drawer beneath it. Inside rested a small cardboard box I hadn't touched in years. I lifted the lid. Inside were receipts folded, yellowing, brittle with age, as if each one were an apology I had written in ink. Emily's tuition, her first car payment, a down payment on her condo. Just a little help, she'd said. Every slip of paper, a reminder of how I had stitched her life together, thread by thread, while mine frayed unnoticed. I pulled out one receipt, University of Georgia, final installment, paid in full. My handwriting looked so confident then. I could almost picture myself at the counter signing it, saying, "Don't worry about anything, just focus on your future." Buried between the papers was a crumpled note written in childish crayon. The edges had torn, the colors had faded. "Mommy, you're my hero," it read in lopsided letters. A sound left me, not quite a sob, not quite a laugh, something in between. I sat at the table, holding the note as if it might crumble into dust, remembering the way she'd taped it to the refrigerator so I'd see it every morning before work, back when gratitude was easy for her, back when love didn't have sharp edges. After a long moment, I reached for a pen. A small notepad lay nearby. I opened it to the first blank page and wrote, slowly, clearly, "No more apologizing for existing." I tore out the page, folded it in half, and placed it on top of the receipts, on top of the year's worth of little help she no longer remembered or acknowledged. Then I closed the box and pressed both hands on the lid, sealing more than paper inside. The heater clicked on. The wind outside rattled the shutters, but this time the sound didn't make me flinch. I stood still, breathing deeply, letting the quiet settle around me. For the first time in a long while, the silence didn't feel like punishment. It felt like proof I wasn't gone. I woke before the sun, the house wrapped in that deep, expectant kind of quiet like a blank page, waiting for its first line. I made myself a cup of coffee, black and uncomplicated, then placed the small box from last night on the table beside me. Inside were the receipts, the faded crayon note, and the message I had written, "No more apologizing for existing." By 7 o'clock, I was sitting in Mr. Keller's office. He'd handled my husband's estate, helped me buy my home, always professional, always kind, never intrusive. He looked up as I entered. "You're early, Mary." "I need to update some things," I said, placing the folder on his desk. "Changes to your will?" he asked gently. I nodded. "Yes. Everything that was meant for my daughter, I want it redirected. A local scholarship fund, something for single mothers trying to finish school." He studied me for a moment, weighing whether he should ask any questions. "Are you certain?" "I've never been more certain." He began typing, asking the necessary details. My answers were steady, unshaken. When he slid the stack of papers toward me, my signature flowed smoothly across each page. No trembling, no hesitation. "Would you like to leave a note for your daughter?" he asked quietly. "I already have," I said. Back home, I sat at the kitchen table with a sheet of plain white paper and wrote a short letter, simple, direct, no theatrics. "You asked me to disappear. I've honored that from your life, not from the world. May the emptiness I leave behind be filled with something gentler than pride." I folded the letter, sealed it in an envelope marked Emily, and placed it in the box alongside everything else. Then I locked the box inside the safe next to the pantry. When I stepped outside, the morning sun filtered through the oak branches, turning the sidewalk golden. The air smelled faintly of salt and clean beginnings. I didn't rush. For once, I walked slowly, each step lighter than the last, as though the city itself had been waiting for me to loosen my grip on the past. The next few days stretched out quietly. No calls, no messages. I checked my phone out of habit, scrolling past weather alerts and store coupons. But the silence wasn't heavy anymore. It felt clean, like the air after a storm. On the third day, my phone buzzed once. A message from Mark. "She read your letter. She's not ready to talk." I stared at the screen for a long time before typing. "Neither am I." He didn't reply. And for the first time in years, the end of a conversation before it even began felt like relief, not loss. That afternoon, I walked down to River Street. The winter sun shimmered on the water. Cobbled stones beneath my feet still held the morning's chill. Tourists drifted by in slow clusters, their laughter echoing softly off the old brick buildings. I found a bench overlooking the river and sat, letting the cool air wrap around me. A pair of children chased pigeons along the railing. Behind me, a woman's laugh rang out bright and unburdened. For once, I didn't feel like an outsider listening through glass. I just listened. A violinist played nearby, a slow, wandering melody. Not cheerful, not sad, something in between. Something that sounded like starting over. I dropped a few bills into his open case, nodding when he looked up. Then I stood to leave. My phone vibrated again, an unknown number this time. I didn't open it. I switched off the sound, tucked it back into my coat pocket, and kept walking. The river moved beside me, steady and sure. I matched my steps to its rhythm. And for the first time in a long while, the quiet inside me didn't echo. It simply existed. A year later, Christmas felt different. No polished silver, no forced laughter, no grand performance. Just paper plates, roast turkey, and coffee so strong it woke your soul. I stood behind the counter at the shelter, scooping mashed potatoes onto trays, while voices around me rose in easy, unpracticed joy. A young mother approached, her little boy clinging to her sleeve. "You're Mrs. Cole, right?" "I am," I answered. She hesitated before whispering, "Your scholarship saved us. I'm graduating next spring." The gratitude in her eyes washed over me like warm sunlight after too many cold mornings. "You did the hard part," I said. "You kept going." Her son reached for a cookie with crumbs already stuck to his fingers. I handed him another napkin, and he gave me a grin big enough to melt the toughest day. When the line dwindled, I walked to the modest Christmas tree in the corner, decorated with mismatched ornaments donated by strangers. From my pocket, I pulled out a small silver heart and hung it on the lowest branch. The light caught it softly, not glamorous, just honest. I stepped back and felt something loosen inside my chest. Not triumph, not sorrow, peace. That night, I returned home to the soft sound of rain tapping against the windows. The house smelled faintly of lemon oil and old wood. I set down my keys, hung my coat, and stood by the front door for a long, still moment. The porch light switch was right where it always was. For years, I'd kept that light burning for Emily so she'd never come home to darkness. My silent way of saying, "I'm here, no matter what." I flicked the switch. The bulb hummed to life and glowed against the rain-soaked night. But this time, the light wasn't for her. It was for me. I opened the door a few inches, letting the night air brush against my face, and whispered into the dark, "For the woman who survived being erased." The wind carried the words away gently, as if promising to keep them. I closed the door, made myself a cup of tea, and sat by the window. The porch light shone through the storm, soft and steady. A reminder. When love turns cruel, you don't have to dim yourself to match it. You can leave the light on for the person who made it through.